All right, so welcome. This is a joint info session this morning. We'll be going over two grant programs, the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape Mini Grant Program and the Clean Water Fund. We've made the timeline and application questions very similar for both in an attempt to make it easier for you as project leads to apply to both programs if your project is a good fit for both. So here's a brief agenda for today. We'll be first introducing ourselves in just a minute, and then going over the Clean Water Fund, and then the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape mini grants. And then we're going to go over a couple of scenarios of how the two programs could potentially work together. And then we'll take questions between both of the descriptions and at the end. Feel free to jump out with questions at any point, really. All right, so I'm Megan Blackman. I'm with the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. I administer the Clean Water Fund on behalf of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. The Clean Water Fund is a donor-advised fund that is held at the Lancaster County Community Foundation. The Community Foundation allows us to use their portal to accept applications, and we also use it to do the grant agreements and grant reporting once grants are awarded. So we have Alma Felix here from the Community Foundation.
Hi everyone, my name is Alma Felix. I am a program officer at the Community Foundation. Happy to be here.
And I'll wrap up the intros. My name's Jen Tison. I'm VP of Operations and Conservation at the Lancaster Conservancy, and I'm the program manager for the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape Mini Grants. We work closely with DCNR, who is the actual provider of the funds to us. So we are a state-funded grant program, which gives us a little bit more restrictions we have to adhere to, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I'm glad to have you all here.
Great, so we'll get started with the Clean Water Fund specifics. So we are accepting applications for the Clean Water Fund of up to $25,000. Nonprofits and municipalities are eligible to apply. The Clean Water Fund is meant to be a catalyst for increased collaboration. So we would like to engage new audiences in clean water work in Lancaster County. And we welcome your innovative ideas for doing so. Again, it is a donor advised fund that's held at the Community Foundation. So eligibility requirements are those of the Community Foundation.
So most of our eligibility requirements, or all of them, are listed on the screen. If you would like any resources for any of these, we do have some available on our website, which is on the screen. So things like providing your non-discrimination policy as it applies to your organization. So this is, there's no specific way that it needs to look like. It's whatever applies to your organization. Align with the Community Foundation's anti-hate policy. There's nothing that you have to do with that. That's just something that we put out there that is a requirement for organizations to be in alignment. And then serve Lancaster County residents without discrimination. This is related to specific projects. Projects needs to be serving Lancaster County without discrimination. Current 501c3 designation from the IRS. So with this specific fund, I know that the Clean Water Partners also accept grants from municipalities and potentially community groups working with city government or anything like that. But the organization that's applying, even if there's partners involved in the project, it needs to be 501c3 or municipality. Registered with the Pennsylvania Bureau of Charitable Organizations. So this one and the Form 990 are really things that organizations or charitable organizations in the Pennsylvania need to be in alignment with to be able to receive donations. So we require that also. There are some exemptions to the PA Bureau of Charitable Organizations. They are listed on their website. So if you are an exemption, there's a place where you can put that in your application. An annual audit or financial review by an independent CPA within the last 12 months. For this specific grant, it is encouraged, but not a requirement. For most of our other grants, it is a requirement. And then in good standing with all existing awards and contracts with the Community Foundation and Clean Water Partners as well. And I guess in this case, it's the the other partners that are involved in this as well. So again, if you need any resources, for example, templates, because you would like to create a non-discrimination policy or anything like that, we do have those available at langfound.org/grants. Under eligibility, there's a resources as well.
Great, thanks, Alma. All right, sorry, I jumped ahead, but all right. So for the Clean Water Fund, in the past, we have had two separate categories for these smaller funds. One was implementation, one was more outreach oriented. This year, we're combining the two smaller funds into one. So either implementation projects, which are the actual shovels in the ground projects, or outreach and education monitoring, they're all eligible for this Clean Water Fund this year. So projects, anything that would engage the community in learning about water quality, watersheds, what they can do to help water quality, any of that is eligible, as is engaging the public and actually participating in implementation projects. And so there's just a few ideas on the screen here. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few ideas to get you started with brainstorming. So it could be educational campaigns, even art installations if it has a clean water message, signage, water quality monitoring, even introducing students to conservation careers, or the general public for that matter. It doesn't have to be students, or implementation projects like green infrastructure, riparian buffers, even ag BMPs are eligible. So we have a simple process to apply. First, you would contact me. We do need a project description so that I can make sure that it is eligible and fits what we're looking for the Clean Water Fund. And I can also, advise you on how to strengthen your application. In addition to the Community Foundation webpage and how to apply, we also have a webpage on our website. The website's here, lancastercleanwaterpartners.com. If you go to that main website, you can go under resources and tools and select the Clean Water Fund. We have a page there that has, the application questions are available. It'll have the recording of this session today, as well as our info sheet and the timeline there. And there's a lot of past examples. We'll go over some of those in a minute, but even more examples are on our webpage for you to view, to put together, help you in thinking through your application. So when you contact me, if it is a good fit, then I'll provide an access code. You'll need that for when you go through the Community Foundation's portal. You'll put in the code in order to access the application. Applications are ultimately due on July 1st. However, we highly encourage you to submit a draft application by June 3rd. If you submit the draft application, which is actually through the portal, so you'll fill out the application and then you select a button on the bottom that says this is a draft application, it's by June 3rd, and I would like feedback. And then you click submit in order for that to happen. We'll review that and provide you with comments within the portal and re-release it by June 17th so that you'll have it back in time to re-edit and then submit before the July 1st deadline. So June 3rd is the date to have in mind. So we have some examples on the screen today. These are just a few examples of what we have funded in the past. Again, there's more on our website. The website's at the bottom of the screen again. So these are all educational projects here. They range from storytelling through the River Connections project within the city to the Lancaster Conservancy's wildlife habitat training and signage at Quarryville Borough, where they did some riparian buffer plantings about the benefits of riparian buffers, and the interfaith partners for the Chesapeake's ongoing work with congregations throughout the county. Here's some implementation projects that have been funded through the Clean Water Fund, and you can see that they range from agricultural to more urban area, stormwater projects, meadow plantings. So really, again, any kind of BMP implementation is eligible as long as it does result in water quality improvements. All right, so here's the overall timeline. So again, June 3rd is the date for submitting a draft application for feedback, and then applications are due July 1st. If you are awarded a project, or either way, you'll find out by August 30th. If you are awarded, the grant period for the Clean Water Fund is September 1st through September 1st of next year, so you'll have a 1-year period. The grant agreement will be through the portal, and once it's signed, you'll receive all funding upfront. We do want to be involved. We like to be involved in all of these and stay on top of communications. So we'll want to know any dates of projects or plantings or the implementation that you're doing. So we like to keep those lines of communication open. And then a final report will be due by October 1st of next year. All right, so any questions specifically about the Clean Water Fund? And always reach out to me with any project-specific questions that you may have as you prepare your application. All right, so if no questions now, we can move on. I see one in the chat. Do all projects need to be new or innovative, or can they be extensions of current work? They can certainly be extensions of what you're already doing. We do like to engage new audiences, so I would try to expand upon any new partnerships that you may be planning. Can be what you're already doing, but maybe you're reaching out to new schools or new property owners within, expanded geography or something like that within Lancaster County. All right.
All right, moving on to the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape. Thanks everyone again for coming to the info session and learning about our 2024 mini grant round. For those of you that might have applied in the past, either last year or in previous years, this year's process looks a little different. As Megan mentioned, we collaborated this year with the Clean Water Partners Clean Water Fund to try and make it really easy for applicants to apply to both programs and to align those kinds of resources and timelines, so you're not doing two separate applications, especially if the projects are eligible for matches. And we've had some examples of those in the past where one organization applies for a mini grant and a Clean Water Fund grant, and the project is fully funded that way. So we're really looking forward to hopefully getting some more of those types of projects. But before we get into it, I want to talk about what the CL is and what the mini grants are. So as we've mentioned a few times, the SRCL stands for Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape. We represent the collaboration working to protect land, steward natural and cultural resources, connect people with those natural spaces, and promote sustainable development. Designated by DCNR in 2010, the SRCL is one of 8 conservation landscapes in Pennsylvania where partners work together to protect natural assets and improve quality of life for community members. The Conservancy serves as the external lead of the SRCL in partnership with DCNR, the internal lead. Many of you know Lori Yike, who is on this call today. Thanks, Lori. And she is the SRCL representative from DCNR. The SRCL leadership team consists of the Conservancy, DCNR, York and Lancaster Planning Commissions, state parks, and Susquehanna National Heritage Area. But as this map shows, the SRCL is also a location, and this is important to remember when you're looking at potentially applying for one of our grants. The SRCL technically encompasses all municipalities that touch the river and the boroughs that sit fully within those municipalities, so anything within the green boundary on the map here. However, as you can see, this does not include the cities of Lancaster and York. Unfortunately, that limits a lot of the projects that we can fund. The SRCL is the smallest conservation landscape in the state, but I think that makes it one with the most inherent placemaking involved in it. So it's a really special place, and we find some really cool projects to fund within it. Mini grants are an essential part of every conservation landscape, and the SRCL is no different. This year, we have $50,000 to award in total in the form of small grants ranging from $2,500 to $25,000. Projects should advance the mission of the SRCL and focus on one or more of the following areas. And like many grants, the more areas that you can check, the higher your project will score. So these are habitat and trail connectivity, sustainable access to the river and the surrounding natural lands, community partnership and collaboration, or ecosystem health. The Conservancy's website has a link to the SRCL strategic plan where you can learn more about each of these different items. And as I mentioned before, it's important to note that we are funded by a DCNR grant, and so we have to follow all of those restrictions and the timelines that DCNR sets out for the grant to us as well. Which leads me to eligibility. Eligible entities include 501c3 nonprofits, municipalities, local government agencies, and some educational entities. Full eligibility details can be found on our website, which is linked on the screen below. If you don't fit exactly in one of these categories, still reach out to me. There might be some creative opportunities to still apply for a grant. There have been instances where organizations are working on getting their nonprofit status, but it won't have been achieved by the time the application is submitted. And then we've been able to partner with other organizations to get that funded. So if you don't think you fit here, it's still worth applying or reaching out to me if you think you have a good project. As I mentioned before, projects must benefit residents of and visitors to the SRCL without discrimination. There is a little bit of wiggle room in this that I'll talk about a little bit later. We do require a 50% match. That's different from the Clean Water Fund requirements. So that is definitely something to keep in mind as you look at the eligibility here. And again, the full details can be found on our website. So really quickly back to the map. You'll recall that all of the municipalities along the river are technically the boundaries of the Susquehanna Riverlands. However, for the purposes of the mini grants, there is just a little bit of flexibility in the geographic extent here. We do have a few examples of projects that have sat technically outside of the boundary of the CL if they have a direct connection to the CL. So an example in the past has been a project along the Enola Low Grade Trail that technically sits outside the boundary, but because the Enola is such a important feature in the SRCL itself, you know, we've been able to connect that directly to benefiting the CL. So examples like that, same thing with major waterways that might sit right outside the boundary that would technically make you ineligible, but if it, you know, it's close enough and directly relates to it, we might be able to make an exception. So again, if you have any questions or you think you're right on the boundary of being eligible, please reach out to me. It's definitely worth having a conversation. Okay, up until now, everything about the mini grants has been really consistent with previous years. The application process this year is where things change a little bit. And this slide should very closely mirror Megan's slide about the Clean Water Fund. So just like Megan said, you can email me a brief description of your project and I'll give you a link to the application. Unfortunately, the Conservancy's mini grant program does not sit with the Community Foundation, so we can't use their fancy portal. So we will be using the Google form nature again, like we did last year. So I think that's a fairly easy form that most people are familiar with. If you have applied previously, you'll note that we do not require a letter of intent this year. We've tried to reduce some of those initial barriers to entry. So all you need is a really quick description of your project emailed to me. My email's right there on the screen, and I'll get you a link if your project is eligible. Just like the Clean Water Fund, if you want to submit a draft for us to review, that would be due on June 3rd. And full applications are due on July 1st. So we're hitting those same benchmarks of time and the questions are almost identical between the two applications. We will notify you if you have been funded by August 30th. We will also notify you if you were not selected for funding, so you won't be waiting months and months after. I know as a grant applicant myself, that's one of the worst parts, just the waiting. And we do an 18-month funding period. So it will be 18 months after the grant is awarded that your project will continue. And there is just a little bit of wiggle room in that. Again, this is funded by a DCNR grant to the Conservancy, so we can't extend past their deadline. But I know there's some extenuating circumstances, and we're happy to talk about extensions if needed. Our funding is released a little bit differently than the Clean Water Fund in that, you know, after you are awarded a grant, you'll sign an agreement and begin your project. And then to receive payment, typically you would submit invoices and proof of payment for project elements to get payment from the mini grant program. And then the final 10% of the grant award will be held until closeout. The closeout process is pretty easy. You can complete a final financial report and then a really easy success story, which is like a 2-page with photographs. So it's pretty easy. We do ask for periodic progress reports. And usually that's just me reaching out at the end of the year, quarterly, asking for a quick email update. So there's no full form or anything like that. We try to keep it really easy for you all who are applying. And then I just want to go over some examples of previously funded projects. We have on our website with the mini grants a neat map that's interactive that you can click on project locations and find brief descriptions of each of these. That goes back, I think, almost to the beginning of the mini grant program's life. There's a lot of different things to look through there, just like Megan mentioned. But I wanted to highlight a few here just to show some of the depth and breadth of the projects that we funded in the last couple of years. So these are really recently funded. So the first one here is Conestoga Trail Saturdays. This was a project led by Keystone Trails Association, or KTA, where they organized volunteer work days along the Conestoga Trail to improve it. And they, gave their volunteers pizza and all that fun stuff. So there's a fun picture of that one. That was a really successful one. We have another project by Mardick Township, who is doing an Enola Rail Trail parking expansion. This is off Route 324, a really popular location there, as I'm sure many of you are aware. Another one that we recently funded is for YWCA in York to do a Camp Kennedy on environmental education project, where they invited local experts to their summer camp. Wrightsville Borough was awarded a grant to upgrade interpretive signage at their Wrightsville Waterfront Park. So that was a fun, different one as well. And then finally, we also fund plans. So an example of that is the Conestoga River Club got a mini grant to complete their Conestoga River Water Trail Assessment Plan, which is a master plan for access to the Conestoga River. And so that was an exciting one that was wrapped up last year. Okay, that concludes my summary of the mini grant. So I'm happy to answer any questions directly about the mini grant program before we get into some of the options for joint applications. And again, most of these questions, we have a FAQ section on our website, which is linked here. You can copy that right into your browser and it'll go through lots of different resources, including an export of the application questions, along with an example of the contract that you would be signing should you be awarded funding. So if there are no questions now, we can move right on into we have prepared two examples of how the two programs might be paired. The first example is more of an implementation grant. In this example, a nonprofit is proposing to expand their existing parking lot and welcome center and a popular trail along the river in Lancaster County. Important to note that if you're going to apply for a joint application here, it has to be in Lancaster County because the Clean Water Fund does not extend into York. So they want to add spaces to their existing parking lot, including ADA spaces, and then to address the additional impervious cover and to educate the public about the importance of stormwater management. They're adding a rain garden with interpretive signage. Importantly, the parking lot and rain garden have already gone through preliminary design, engineering, and permitting. So they are ready to go and they are ready to put the shovels in the ground. The nonprofit estimates that the project will cost $40,000, and we'll have a quick budget summary on the next slide. They are anticipating applying to the mini grant program for $20,000, the Clean Water Fund for $17,000, and an in-kind match of $3,000, which is staff time. So this budget will look similar to what you would submit for both applications. We'll ask you to put line items for your different budget categories. So in this case, the budget would include professional services costs, materials for the parking lot, materials for the rain garden, the landscaping, the plants and things of that sort, and then the staff time, which they have listed here at $30 per hour for 1,000 or for 100 hours. And then the final line item that they list is the signage for that interpretive rain garden. And then for this one, because there's multiple funding sources and matches, each of those funding sources will show what they're paying for. So in this case, they're putting all $20,000 for the CL mini grant to the parking lot materials. And then all of the in-kind match will be staff time, and the remainder of the funding they're going to apply to the Clean Water Grant for. So that's their total budget of $40,000 with the split, as you can see there. So this would be a really great way to think about your project. Another thing that's included in the budgeting process for the grant is just a brief narrative summary of your budget. So you'll be asked to go into each of these line items basically and give a little bit more detail on what that includes. Awesome. Next one, Megan.
Yeah, so our second example is an educational project. Again, this is a hypothetical scenario of how the two programs may be combined. Again, you would be applying separately to the programs, but this would be the kind of the joint description and budget here. So in this example, it's an educational foundation that's associated with a school district, again, in Lancaster County, where they're aiming to expand some educational programming. That's all watershed, water quality related, for students to learn more about their local watershed, what BMPs are going on in their local watershed and the organizations doing those, as well as career opportunities too. So they're planning on putting together some experiential learning where students would actually help with some BMP implementation, like a buffer project. They would visit some of these BMPs and even get out in kayaks to in their local waterway. So they've already been planning it somewhat. They have the gist of the plan in place, but they have a few more logistics to iron out during the grant program or grant period. So this educational foundation, they're the ones applying, and they estimate that the whole project will cost 25,000. They're planning on applying to both the Susquehanna Riverlands Conservation Landscape Program for 10,000, also 10,000 from the Clean Water Fund, and they're again committing in-kind match of staff time for $5,000. Here's another budget breakout for you. Again, these are hypothetical numbers. I don't know how much transportation really cost for field trips. But so there's some time in here for professional services for their instructional coach to make sure that it aligns with the state standards for science, and to figure out the logistics of how the field trips would go. There's again, professional services in this case to lead a kayaking trip that they would be paying another organization for, the transportation costs, materials for the planting that they're involved with, and then other materials for handouts and any consumable supplies for lessons. Again, we would ask for a little bit more detail there about what supplies they're planning on buying and the planting supplies. And then the staff time here is, they have a rate per hour, estimated 100 hours, and this will need to be tracked over the course of the grant period too, if it was awarded. So yeah, this is another example. I think for anything like this, we encourage you to reach out to Jen or I or both of us, and we'll set up a joint conversation if you do think that your project would be eligible for both programs and are interested in submitting something like this.
Excellent. Well, I
Any
think that,
questions to wrap up? Yeah.
joint questions for either program. Happy to review anything that you might have. And I think, since we do have Alma here from the Community Foundation, I think it's important to note that if one of your projects maybe doesn't fit with either the Clean Water Partners or the Lancaster Conservancy's mini grant program, the Community Foundation is having an exciting 100-year grant round this year that might be a better fit for it. So Alma, if you want to give a quick shout out.
And if we go to the next slide, there's just a fun graphic potentially. But the Community Foundations, it's their 100-year anniversary this year, and we have a unique opportunity called the Shaping Tomorrow Awards, and where we're awarding a total of $1 million, but there's 250,000 allocated for the category of Our Planet. So if for whatever reason your clean water projects don't fit any of these projects that were talked about today, the Shaping Tomorrow, Our Planet category is an option. Applications open June 3rd. If also your organization has other projects that you do that are more than clean water, for example, focusing on renewable energy, thinking about beautification of cities, green spaces, if you're thinking about environmental education, biodiversity, anything related to our planet, it's very broad, this opportunity for anything like that. We're looking for some really big best ideas, and there's 3 different levels that we're looking at. There's the $5,000 to $14,999 level, which is level 1. There's 15,000 to 49,999 level, which is level 2. And then there's 50,000 to $100,000 level, which is a level 3. And that one would require collaboration with at least 2 other partners, whether it's other nonprofits, municipalities, or even for-profit partners. So yeah, that is also an option, and that is at langfound.org/grants. If you do have questions about that, my information is on our site.
Great, thank you. The slide isn't coming up for me, but
It's
yeah.
okay. There's not much information on it anyways.
So great question from the chat. We are recording this, and I think it will be posted on all 3 of our websites. So there'll be plenty of places for you to find these slides and for you to share links with anybody who might be interested. So just stay tuned after, and we'll share those out.
Yeah, and I think the main takeaway too is just feel free to reach out to Jen or I or both of us if you have questions about a specific project. Okay, I'll stop the recording now.